Come and talk to me, I really wanna know your thoughts. Come bust it up with your girl. Just be you, just Jocelyn, keeping it real.
Hey guys, welcome to Talk to Me Tuesday. I'm your host, just Jocelyn, and today is Tuesday, October 22nd, and we are talking about the Purple Heart. So for all you guys who do not know, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, so I did want to bring my lovely guest in here so that we can have an open conversation. Just want to put the trigger warning out here for this episode. Will be some great detail. I just want anybody who feel like they may be triggered by the episode or by any of the contents of the show to please use your own discretion with viewing. But I want to welcome all of you. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves a little bit, but you know, you got a little repeat. So welcome back, Janessa.
Thank you.
Tell the people who you are.
My name is Janessa Rivera, and I am the owner and founder of Rebirth Journey, LLC.
Rebirth Journey, and you're going to tell us more about that a little
Absolutely.
bit. Okay, cool. And Katie.
Hi, I'm Teresa Fetzer, and I guess I'm just a domestic survivor. I don't have any foundations or anything yet.
Yes.
This is speaking into
Exactly, that's right. And again, you are a survivor, so we're just here, like I said, to have open conversation about a lot of the domestic violence that does exist here in our community. So just wanted to have that open conversation. Of course, you guys know if you have any questions, feel free to ask your questions. We will try to address them the best that we can. We want to make sure that this episode is very informative to anybody that may be experiencing domestic violence, who may have been closely affected by the domestic violence. So thank you guys for coming in and being willing to talk on the topic. And of course, thank you guys for watching. So I want to start by getting you guys, not definition of domestic violence, but what does that look like to you? Because I think that more often than not, the main issue is people being unaware of, their circumstance or knowing what a domestic violence situation is. So many people have their own stereotypes of what it looks like. So if you guys could give me your own idea.
Okay, I guess I'll start. So one of the first things that I like to mention is before I became Rebirth Journey, I was just Janessa, a professional in the social services world, and I was a counselor, and I also ran support groups for domestic violence. So I knew what the book definition of domestic violence was, and that's my background. And I did that for years. And the whole time I was doing that, I didn't realize that I was a domestic violence victim myself. Because for me, at that time growing up, it was domestic violence is physical, and it is you getting hurt, and it's you having bruises, going to the hospital, and also it was the victim is powerless, and the victim is the only one that's attacked. That's what I was under the impression of.
Okay.
And everyone that I was serving, the population, that was their story.
Okay.
And their story was that they were trying to escape. So what domestic violence looked like to me is now that I know that there's so many different forms of domestic violence. I myself was a survivor and a thriver of narcissistic abuse, which is a type of domestic violence.
Okay.
And I never even knew what that was. So that is like an extreme form of verbal and emotional abuse. It's kind of like psychological abuse to its highest form. Okay? So for me, domestic violence is the abuse between an intimate couple, an intimate partner, that could be a combination of physical, emotional, sexual, or verbal abuse. Okay? And the word abuse is so vague, so many different things. It's not necessarily something that you can see, it's not necessarily something that you can feel, but what it comes down to is the individual who identifies as the victim, if they feel disrespected, if they feel unsafe, if they feel as though they don't have control of their well-being, that is abusive and it is toxic and it's an unhealthy relationship. So I had to learn through life experiences, process and error, and some research and education that I was also a victim of domestic violence, and it took me some time because I would fight back, I would fight back verbally and physically, and then sometimes I was an abuser too. That's called reactive abuse because that's what we learn to do.
Okay.
Because in a relationship, the abuser has the power and the control, and they do that through the abuse. So victims learn how to have power and control by being abusive. So I never identified it as domestic violence because I'm like, I can't call him the abuser and I'm also abusing.
Yeah.
Right? And also in my mind, I was like, I ain't no punk. I ain't getting, you know.
Yeah.
So that's how I would describe it because it's so vague and it really, I would say it depends on the individual because everyone has a different threshold of what respect and unhealthy looks like for them. Okay, and everyone has different boundaries. But overall,
That was the important part. That the few key things that you said. The abuse factor is anything that makes you feel uncomfortable. So it's not even it's no picture perfect. You know, it looks like this. It looks exactly no cookie cutter way. If it's something that you feel like someone is disrespecting you or making you feel uncomfortable, you don't have that control aspect. Then you may be in an abusive situation. So I appreciate that. That was a good definition, Teresa. And of course, there's no right or wrong. I just want to know like your thought process behind it, because again, I feel like so many of us we just think about it so differently.
Well, for me, I think it's a domino effect, and for me, meaning it's for me, this is my opinion, and the way it was for me from childhood.
Okay.
So, and it was a domino effect. So my biological mother was an abused woman. She left. My father got to another relationship who was my mother. He abused her. Ultimately, she passed away from his abuse, which is heartbreaking. And then I got into relationships where they were mentally, verbally, and then it became physically abusive towards me. And that affected my oldest daughter with her self-esteem issues because my mother was verbally abusive towards her because she was verbally abused by my father. So it's all a domino effect, and then it affected my youngest child with her father because our relationship had became verbally abusive because of disrespect issues. Once again, everyone has different levels of disrespect, and so for me, domestic violence is a domino effect. So meaning it starts in the beginning, and we carry it with us, even though, we say we heal. We had a conversation, about people in sobriety. We're always healing, and it can come, yes, it can come back at any time, and it's what you open the door and allow in, and I just want to say, like, in relationships, domestic violence relationships are deep. The police don't even come out alone. Okay, and then people don't get involved because the person goes back to the abuser quite often because they think that's normal. They think that's love, and I'm not saying they don't love that person, and I'm gonna keep it real. Maybe that person loves them as well. To them, that's their definition of love.
And that's why the fact that you said that, so I love your definition of it being a domino effect, because again, we don't understand these situations that we think we're just the victim. And it's just like, oh, it's just about me and him or me and her or whatever the case, especially in an intimate relationship. You're just looking at you and your partner, and it's just like, okay, whether it's physical, mental, whatever, you feel like it's just the two of us. Not realizing how that does trickle down, whether it be to your children, and then you become the child, and then you become the parent, and all of those things. So it just stays with you and sticks with you. And then, like you said, everybody, because even not to give, of course, like credit or anything, but just being aware and understanding that the dynamic of that abuser, like the person that has been the abuser, not knowing where it came from and how it trickled down, and they just happen to become the abuser based on that's what they see. So with you saying that they probably do love you or things like that, that is where that confusion comes in. So I think that those were some great definitions. Like I said, I wasn't looking for like a right or wrong answer, but just understanding that we do have those two different scenarios. And Teresa, I didn't mean to cut you off, so I want to let you finish where you were going with that, just with in those relationships. And of course we're speaking physical ideally right now with the police coming out and things like that, and how much of a struggle it is when you're trying to get other people involved. And I want you both to speak on that, but Teresa, you can continue.
Oh wow, it's a struggle. People don't get involved. People shun from it. They don't I'm very well loved. I mean, I have an amazing family, friends. I'm blessed. and I'm keeping it, nobody got involved in many of my situations, and you know, it was sad for me, and it was like, it was just deep, and it was an emotional struggle for me to get out of, you know, just, and I'm gonna be honest, because I had to go all the way back to my childhood to deal with it, and that's where I'm at today, and I'm still climbing out of it, and I'm doing amazing, and I thank God for that, but that's because I've met people, you know, that I don't know, and who have helped me tremendously to deal with that, but people I know did not get involved. I mean, they were like, you know this, you know that, you know this. Well, how do you make someone leave, or how do you make someone stop, or how do you say to yourself, this is not right? Like, you know what I'm saying? How do you get out of that situation? Because you think it's normal, because, you know, when it's bad, it's bad, when it's good, no matter what it is. Whether, and I don't mean just in a relationship, like people, domestic violence is just not a relationship.
Yeah.
It's so many aspects, like it's family members, it's friends, it's people you know. And people are like, well, that's just abuse. No, it's domestic. You know, domestic has a very big definition. So folks don't get involved, and you have to figure it out on your own. But there are resources out there, and I've discovered that outsiders are more willing to help than insiders. And for whatever reason, I respect that. You know what I'm saying?
And I think it has a lot to do, and Janessa, you can, you know, let me know how you feel about that. But more often than not, when you speak on the cops, that's one thing. But when you speak about that family and friends, like that goes back to our childhood, and you hit them with the, oh, I'm gonna get my sister to beat you up, oh, I'm gonna get my brother to come, and then your brother done beat your boyfriend up, and then next thing you know, y'all at the movies together, and now your brother wants to beat you up. So, you know, and it's like, we joke about it, but realistically, that's the same concept. You know, and it starts when we're teenagers and thinking it's cute, and then it just escalates, and then of course, family is just like, well, I don't really know what to do, you know, and then sometimes you get into situations where, you know, you put these people involved, and then sometimes we don't even, we're like, no, don't kill them, like, you know, so it can be definitely, you know, I'm sure it can be an issue with people wanting to get involved and seeing from sitting on the sidelines and wanting to support you, but then just not knowing how to. What do you say about that?
So for me, it was a really unique situation, and I would say it was like a double-edged sword because, excuse me, I'm somehow using my voice. It was a double-edged sword because I was married to my abuser, so that like antes it up a little bit when you're married, especially with the cops and things like that. So first thing, I'm Latina, and culturally, we don't believe in divorce, and we also believe, like a lot of other Caribbeans or a lot of other minorities, what happens in the house stays in the house, okay? So death do us part. You know, I come from a two-parent household, they're still married. I never witnessed abuse growing up, so I didn't know what it looked like or what it didn't look like. I only knew the stories of what I read in school, okay? So I thought what we went through were marriage quarrels, okay? I didn't know. I also am a healer, and I'm very empathetic, and my ex-husband had a very rough childhood. So because I'm a social worker, I assumed his behavior came from his traumatic experience as an adult, as a child, and I wanted to heal and fix him, okay? So I was trying to keep his demons a secret because I wanted to help my husband. So I would be private for multiple reasons. One, I didn't want to tell his secrets. Two, I didn't want to demonize him because I felt it wasn't his fault, the trauma that he endured that now he's exhibiting as an adult. Because as a social worker, I understood how that played. And three, culturally, you don't tell people what's going on in your house, okay? So realistically,
you just was hit, like, boom, boom,
people were not involved, but it's because I didn't allow them to get involved because they didn't know exactly what was happening. And that was the truth, because I didn't feel, one, I didn't feel it was the right thing to do for my marriage. And two, the people in my life, my dad's my best friend, I have two best guy friends, I have a lot of influential male figures in my life. Uncles, cousins, I got some of them, on the block cousins that work here, they'll put bodies under their belt. So for me, I didn't want to ruin anyone else's life. Okay. If I told my dad, I didn't want my dad going to jail and not being super grandpa because he was saving me.
Right.
I didn't want to tell my two best guy friends who have fiancés and children. What are they going to tell their fiancés and children? They're in jail helping Nessa.
Right.
You know, so I didn't want to ruin anyone else's life. So I didn't tell them what really was happening because I knew it would get lit.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
So that's one reason people weren't involved. But the other side to it is, like Teresa mentioned, it's more than physical. So the public may not have known everything that was happening, but they saw some things. They saw unhealthy behaviors.
Okay.
Okay. They would see name calling, or they would see verbal threats, or verbal abuse, or emotional abuse. They would see that. But once again, we were married, and people don't like to get into married folks' business. Okay. So they didn't see anything that was too extreme, because I covered that up because we were the Huxtables, right? And we were very prominent in our neighborhood, legit the Huxtables. So volunteered a lot, super involved in the kids' school, in the sport. He works for the county in corrections. I had a big job in the county. Okay, so I definitely wasn't about to tell people our business.
Yeah.
But the things that our friends and family saw that they would witness at parties and things like that was like kind of awkward.
Mm-hmm.
We've all been in situations where you go to an event and a couple is like arguing on the side, or something sly happens and you kind of walk by like, oh snap, they're about to get into it or something. So what they did witness, which was like level 3 stuff, okay?
I don't know how many levels. I'm just trying to follow.
Oh, like on a scale of 10.
Okay.
So the things they did witness, which were not the things that I did, but the things they did witness, which are abusive, but our society doesn't know because we normalize it. The things that were abusive, where they could have intervened, they did not, because we were not just boyfriend, girlfriend. You see what I'm saying? That wasn't just any guy. It was my husband, and I was with him for 12 years. And he was the father of my 2 children, you know. And on paper, he's a dope, decent guy, you know. So they didn't want to get involved in that. So that is a double-edged sword. One, people didn't get involved because I didn't tell them the level 10 stuff where they would have gotten involved for not caring that that was my husband.
Right.
And then the level 3 things where they're like, it's not super serious. Let them handle it.
business, kind of.
Right, because we were married, and those were the dynamics. And I am a big traditional person in marriage and stuff like that. Like, I don't believe in divorce. I had to get divorced. And they know that. So people never wanted to intervene in my marriage because they know that I followed that hierarchy. God, husband, wife, kids. That's my personal belief. So people never wanted to intervene in that.
Yeah.
And that is my story with that. But, you know, as far as talking to the authorities, when I was separated and I would try to get the authorities involved, when you're legally married, they could do but so much. Mm-hmm. All the cops could do is make sure he or she is not beating you to a pulp in front of them. That's all they could do. They can't do anything else. We lived in the same house. I can't be like, kick him out the house. He stole my car. I couldn't be like, give me the keys back because he's my husband. So there was a lot that I could not do or get the police to help me with, and except for physically keep me safe.
Right.
Or physically be there while I take the clothes out the house
Okay.
as an escort, you know. In order to move forward, you have to go to the court. You have to go to the judge. You have to file a restraining order. You have to have a reason to have a restraining order. That's the only reason the cops really get involved. They're physically there just like bodyguards to make sure nothing is happening at
right
the
away
time
while they're there.
And even if you have an order in place, all the cops do is make sure it doesn't escalate. Because all they tell you to do, so I've had my ex-husband violate orders, they're like, well, just go to court. So if it happens on Saturday or Sunday or on the holiday, you just gotta wait till the court is open.
Wow.
You know, and then you just have to file a motion and stay there hours until the judge sees you. So literally, if you're not getting like beat up, the cop is not going to intervene.
So would it be safe to say that that the authorities or just the law itself is not really, I don't even want to say on the side of the victim, but just not aware of the wide range of possible abuse. Yeah.
It sucks. And you know, New Jersey, I'm from New Jersey, other side of the bridge. They have they put a lot of money into domestic violence responders.
Okay.
And a lot of people in the courtroom that sit down and they're like domestic violence resource coordinators and things like that. So they have responders that come on site in case there's a situation happening, but they are limited. You know, they're not the cops. They can't do anything. All they're really there to do is make sure that you are not in crisis. They just try to calm you down.
Okay.
But they can't do too much. They're not clinical. Okay, they can't give you like on-site counseling. They can't give you like medication or anything. They're not law enforcement. So in New Jersey, we do have domestic violence responders that all they just try to do is de-escalate the situation and keep you from going in a crisis mode. Okay, they intervene and they'll give you like resources on site. Okay, they're basically like your lifeline friend. Okay, that's all they really are. That's all they can do. There's a lot of laws that prohibit them from doing additional things. Okay.
Hi, this is Janessa Rivera from Rebirth Journey, IG Rebirth_Journey. Make sure you tune in to Talk to Me Tuesday, every Tuesday at 9 p.m.
With my business, the Rebirth Journey, I like to do a lot of education and awareness. I do consultation, and I also try to fight policy, rules, and regulations within the states, within the federal government to give us more rights, because the reality is it's not set up for the professionals to know the different categories that victims go through. Okay?
And that's what I was trying to figure out. It just sounds like just on a widespread just law enforcement legislation. It just doesn't seem like all those different factors that we're referencing, there's a lot of protection against. So
you know it's crazy. I'm in the field, and when you're in the field, honestly, I don't know any school that has a degree of domestic violence specialist. You might take a domestic violence course, but there is no like degree in, like my degree sociology, concentration, social services. There is no degree in like sociology, domestic violence,
Right.
Okay, or domestic violence counselor. You have mental health counseling, you have addictions counseling, marriage and family counseling, not domestic violence counselor. You get like one random class, right? When I worked in a nonprofit and we had a domestic violence program, we didn't have set training for the domestic violence counselor when they started. It was like regular agency training, and we would send them to whatever the county had for like training, okay? And it was very bare minimum, okay? So you don't have specialized training for the DV counselor, let alone anyone else that comes through. I may be someone who's battling with addiction, but when I meet with my counselor, I might be in addictions because my significant other got me hooked into it, and now it's a DV case.
Exactly.
So you're trained to be an addictions counselor, but now you're dealing with DV too because your consumer came in with that. You don't know how to deal with it.
So they're not getting the proper
They're not getting it.
and different things like that. And Teresa, I know that we segued into that based on what you said. Now, as far as the authorities, I know we referenced like family and friends, and not being involved in things like that. Have you had any experience with the authorities not really being able to come in, or like even being able to free to reach out to the authorities based on, because I know you mentioned more so like mental and emotional abuse versus physical. So as Janessa was saying, unless you're getting like pounded on, it's kind of hard. So with that issue, had you ever even thought to like call the cops or anything like that, or it's just like no?
I called the cops a lot.
Okay.
A lot. And each and every time the cops would come, the person that I had the issues with would tell the police officers that I pushed them into a wall. So the cop is like, so if you're both going, then we're going to arrest you both, which was a complete lie.
Yeah.
So I just got tired of calling the cops because really not much could be done. And then because I wasn't like beaten up into a pole, I was just like pushed into a wall. Not just like, I'm
Right.
sorry.
No, I understand.
I didn't mean to minimize that. I should not have been pushed at all. And even the situation where I was literally, when my youngest daughter was a child, her father had literally drugged me across his lawn. Okay, this was crazy, and all I wanted was my child. And drugged me across his lawn. I was beat up. I was bleeding my legs. It was terrible. My daughter witnessed it. He called the police. I was on his property, and there was no custody in place, court order. The police officer told me, you have to get off of this property right now. he's going to press charges against you.
Wow.
I was beat up, but because I was on his property and I just wanted my child.
Wow.
And my daughter witnessed the entire thing, and I had to leave my child there.
Wow.
Yes.
So it was a matter of more so, and not to get too deep into the details, but it was a matter of like you were going to pick up your kid, and it's like, you know, my baby, and then it ended up being a physical altercation, and he flipped it, called the cops on you, and they're like, you're on.
Even though I was beat up and he was 6'3" and yeah, and I was on his property and there was no custody order in place.
So you couldn't even, it wasn't even a matter of not only do you need to get off his property, but she can stay.
Yeah, and she resided with me and she would visit her dad. It was bizarre, and I was just like, they're like, you need to get off this property now. Like, we're gonna arrest you. He's pressing charges against you. With my daughter right there, it was just like, and I was, my knees, I was beat up. It was crazy. I was like, wow.
That's not uncommon. You know, most abusers are master manipulators, and they are king of loopholes, which is why it's so difficult, because when you get outside authorities involved, especially a judge or a police officer, I hate to say, but they're so jaded. They hear these stories all the time. And I've sat in the courtroom when this happens, because first of all, in New Jersey, there is no domestic violence courtroom. You sit in a room just like the people that are there for traffic tickets, okay? Everybody hearing your story from your county. And it's all blended in, okay? It's not like DV's on this day or DV's this time. You're in there for all types of stuff.
And it's just call one up.
You call when you hear people's stories. So the thing is, the professionals are so jaded because they've heard these stories 1,000 times. So it's like, next, to hear the story. Not only are they jaded, some people do exaggerate. Okay,
Yeah.
some people do exaggerate. And the reality is that abuse is gender neutral. Okay, so it may happen to men, it may happen to women. So the authorities are jaded. The authorities have come across people who have exaggerated. So they are very icebox to it, okay? And it's more like a business for them. They have other things to do. And you know, the abuser becomes really crafty in what they say and how they say it. And because it's your word against their word, it's like you have to come there with a stack of documentation to prove that you've been abused. And that's very hard because we're not walking around with all of that. You see what I'm saying? So it's very unfortunate, and that's why I said what I do in my business is I train and give presentations to professionals, to probation officers, to the court clerks, to the judges. I do staff development to professionals to let them know the beyond the textbook
Like there's so much
definition.
more to it.
Absolutely, because it's important. It's important for us to educate community, how we're doing right now, by revealing and being transparent. But it's also important to train the professionals because they're the ones that hold our livelihood in their hands. And we are not dealing with this 9 to 5 when they're at work. We deal with this 5:01 to 8:59 as well. But there's no one we can call at that time, you know?
Okay. Yeah, so that, and that was, I'm glad that you do that, and I did want you to talk more about your business, and I guess we'll have a little bit more time to go into that a little bit more, but just, because that was my main issue. Not only are so many people unaware of, you know, the situations that they may be in, or, you know, what this abuse may look like, but then not knowing where to go or who to talk to and different things like that. So, what are, let me get my question right. You have a question?
Not a question, but a statement. Someone wanted, just for information purposes, they said that Philadelphia does offer a 40-hour DV training.
They do.
Okay. That's interesting. So Philadelphia offers it, so that's great. We can take that and, you know, go forward. So just knowing that additional like resources are out there, very similar to what it is that you're doing, and I'm sure 40 hours is nice, but a little bit more would be, you know, more substantial, but that's somewhere to start versus not, you know, not having any of those resources available. I did want to just talk a little bit, because we both kind of touched on it. You, Teresa, mentioned the trickle down from the family, or, you know, and then you mentioned, Janessa, how traditionally with your family. So a lot of it is coming from what we think is normal. And that's the aspect that I want to touch on in regards to so many things that have been normalized. I think you both said, touched on it a few times, some of those normalized behaviors. So for those people who may be watching that have never been beat up and things like that, like give that normal scenario, if you could, like that normal scenario where it's just like, this can go from 0 to 100 real quick, or as time goes on, it becomes a bigger deal.
Okay. So I actually was doing presentations all earlier today, and I was doing it to the middle school, one of the middle schools, and we were touching on dating violence.
Okay.
And I always say different, and I like to talk in layman's terms, right?
Yeah.
So I was talking to middle school students. So whenever I give general population information, I assume I'm talking to my middle school students.
Okay.
So with physical, emotional, and sexual abuse, everyone has to understand there's 3 main components, even though there's actually like tons more, but 3 main components. And for physical, what community has to understand is the definition of physical abuse is when someone uses force to hurt or restrain an individual. That does not mean they're bleeding, they have a broken bone, they went to the ER, they're bruised, or it even physically hurt them. Okay? If an individual uses force to restrain the individual, that's also physical abuse. So in my example, this is things that were physical abuse and I never knew were physical abuse, because when I tell my story, I'm always like, I didn't get abused until I left, okay? But that's not true. When I went back, I looked at little things and I was like, oh snap, that was physical abuse. Like when I left, I got choked. So of course you think that's physical abuse. But there were so many other things I thought about that were physical, but at the time I didn't count it as physical.
Okay.
So for example, we would be driving in the car, and I got a mouth. Okay. We'd be driving in the car, and if we're arguing, and he didn't like what I was saying, he would tell me to shut the F up. And I'm like, we're talking to him, I want to shut the F up, and I'm da-da-da-da-da-da. Okay? So what he would do is he would accelerate and go like 100 miles, and then push the brakes right before we hit the car. And he'd be like, if you don't shut the F up, I'm going to kill both of us. Okay? So physically, he was threatening me by using force to restrain me from saying what I wanted to say. Then it would escalate that if no one was in front of us, he would swerve on the side of the road to pretend that he was going to hit like a pole. Okay. And then he would be like, I told you to shut the F up. So what did I do? Shut the F up. Because I'm like, I don't know if he's going to do this because it's not that crazy, but just in case.
But who knows?
Okay. Another example of physical abuse, because not that he hurt me per se, but he used physical force to restrain me. Okay. So we would be in the crib arguing or whatever, and I'm like, you know what, you wildin', I'm about to leave. And he would take my keys and put it in his pocket. He'd be like, well, come get the keys then. Okay? And then if I tried, or he would stand in front of the doorway and he would be like, you better not effing move. Push me out the way then. If you move, I'm going to flatten your tires, or when you come back, I'm going to kill you. And then you're going to be dead, I'm going to be in jail, and so our kids are going to be orphans, and it's going to be all your fault. So him standing in the middle of the doorway, not allowing me to go, he wasn't that much bigger than me, but his physical force, he's restraining me, okay? And he was using that as an intimidation factor. That's physical abuse.
Yeah.
Or, we would have an argument, and I'm like, you know what, you're wild, and he'd grab my arm and be like, listen, I'm not done talking to you. Grabbing my arm, you're using force to restrain me from leaving. And these are the definitions that I've given to my students, okay? And there was a situation when I was in college, actually, a friend of mine got into an argument with their significant other, and he didn't like what she had on to go to a party. He felt she was too provocative, and she didn't change, and because she didn't change, he poked her in her eyes. He poked her in the eyes so that nobody would know that he was doing that. Long story short, he's been abusing for her a long time, and he learned what to do to not leave no marks, to not leave any bruises. Who was going to question her? We always itch our eyes or something. It could have been anything, and it would have been his word against hers. So those were forms of physical abuse that I had no idea were physical abuse. Okay, or if we're arguing and we walk in, and he walks by me and pushes me on the bed, that's physical abuse. But I didn't think about that. or he would push me up against the wall, you know, or like kind of push me with the shoulder. That was physical abuse, and I never knew that until I started doing research, and I was like, well then damn. But he told me wasn't the first time.
Right.
There was a lot of other things, and what people don't understand is that it escalates, okay? So, you know, and the first time, and then the emotional part, what we all know emotional abuse is using words or verbal threats to hurt somebody or manipulate them or assassinate their character or make them feel bad, okay? So emotional abuse was happening to me my whole relationship.
Okay.
And I never knew that because in my culture, both Latino culture and minority culture and my generational culture and where I lived culture, it's not uncommon to be called out your name if you're mad. You know, it's not uncommon to be like, you dumb, whatever, if you're mad. It's not uncommon to raise your voice. It's not uncommon to say, you know, you stupid or whatever. It's not uncommon to do that. It's not uncommon to be controlling. Okay? So I never knew that that was abusive. And I did it too. You see what I'm saying? I did it too. And when I would tell my story initially, before I knew it, before I was educated, I'm sure Teresa had the aha moment too. I would be like, oh, well, my husband wasn't abusive until 4 years in, because 4 years in is when the first time he called me out my name.
Okay.
But the first time they do something, it always escalates. So like 4 years, he never called me a B. But once he called me a B, I was a dumb B, a lazy B, a fat B, I was all types of B's.
Right.
And then B wasn't enough. Then it went to the next thing. Then it went to the next thing. Okay? And then ultimately, here we are 12 years later, 5 days before Christmas, in front of our kids and our nephew, tearing me up, choking me. Okay? So it took a long time to escalate, but that's what the abuse looked like for me, and I didn't realize that. And I'm sure, you know, Teresa has her stories of what it looked like to her.
Teresa Fetzer, tune in every Tuesday, 9 p.m. Talk to me Tuesday.
Yeah, what were some, because I know that Janessa mentioned the physical aspect, or, you know, and not the obvious physical aspects, but that emotional that you touched on, what were some of those experiences more so, or things that you feel like people will be able to identify with more now that is not so obvious? So, like, if you were to talk to some of our viewers and then give them an idea of things to look for with the emotional abuse, what would be some of the examples you could give?
Well, actually, she did an excellent job, because all of those things are correct. Like, we do think it's okay, we joke someone's calling us stupid or whatever, but just like little things like, you know, if you have to leave your house, okay, so I want to go to a party and I can't wear a shirt because so-and-so doesn't like it, and I have to change in the car.
Right.
That's emotional abuse.
That's an issue.
You know what I'm saying? You shouldn't have to go in the car and change your shirt. I mean, they have to accept it. They liked you when they started dating you and you were wearing that shirt.
Mm-hmm.
Now that you're dating them, you can't wear that shirt no more.
Right.
So now they're not trying to change who they want you to be. But you were fine when you were you, when you met them. So it's okay for us all to grow and change, and you know, people to say, hey, well, maybe this isn't the right thing to do, but no, you need to do this, or no, and then, or like things that you have, like taking your cell phone and, oh my God, if you don't get off your phone, I'm gonna roof it, or I'm gonna go flatten your tires, or I'm gonna cut your sofas up because they know you worked really hard. You know, and those are all material things. They don't matter, but it's not about the material, it's the mental aspect.
Yeah.
Because you're saying to yourself, oh my God, what am I worked so hard, why is this occurring? But for me, the thing is, we like just start making excuses about everything. And you know what, we just have to stop. Listen, I just want to tell everyone, it's not right for anyone to ever, I don't care if it's your mom, your uncle, your brother, your sister, your cousin, for anyone to ever mistreat you, to talk down to you, to even play with you, say, you stupid. You know, you're not stupid. Because after a while, people will tell you stupid, you think you're stupid.
Right, you start to believe it.
I mean, I catch myself sometimes saying, oh my God, I'm so stupid. And the girls, you know, some really nice women that was blessed to me said, stop saying that. But I don't mean it like that, but we hear it. But then, so then we accept it, we think it's okay. And I'm not saying people can't joke with you and stuff like that. Pay attention to their tone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Pay attention to that. Because ultimately, so my thing is, we just have to learn you know, and this is what I'm discovering, is that you really just have to love yourself for who you are. it's okay. Like, I got this tattoo, perfectly imperfect. That's us. That's the world. That's what we get down. That's what we rock out. When I'm having a bad day, I look at it. It's okay. We're gonna get past this. This is who we are. And the thing is, I just think like nobody has the right to put you down. Like I said, it's not just a partner. It's domestic violence can be your parents, can be your grandparents, can be your siblings. Like people are like, that's abuse. No, it's domestic. Domestic is relationship. Okay, let's get the definition of domestic.
And
okay?
so with that family dynamic, because that's a really important one. A lot of people, because again, when we think domestic violence, we're just thinking about those romantic relationships. But when we're talking about those family dynamics and those family situations where people don't realize that they're being abused in their families, and how those things are set up and those people are putting you down. So I like that you mentioned that it is all about, loving yourself and just being more aware of how people are talking to you. Because those jokes when you got, and I know a couple weeks ago we had someone on the show just talking about, I think it was like weight loss or something like that, and how your family is joking with you, calling you fat mama, cheeseburger, and oh, you so little chocolate self, and all those little things. And those things right there, if it's continuing to be drilled into you, like you said, if you've been getting quite stupid, so playful for so long, and now it's just like, oh, well, maybe I'm a little stupid. Or if nothing else, now I'm starting to use that same verbiage with myself, and it's like, well, no, that's not okay, that's not right. So I think we have a question.
We have two questions.
Okay.
Someone said that let's talk about how the kids are affected, and someone would like to know.
So the kids are affected. Totally. Both of you guys, because you both have children. So whatever relationship you want to touch on, and I know Janessa, most of yours with your ex-husband, but Teresa, you touched on a lot of different.
Well, mine is with my children. Okay, so for my oldest child, it was my mother was verbally abusive, so it gave her low self-esteem because she was verbally abusive to her as well. Even though I tried to, she would hear that. For my youngest child, because and it affected her tremendously because her father and I had such a toxic relationship, it affected my child. That I commend my youngest daughter tremendously because she chose not to allow violence in her life, and she walked away from it. And she will tell me to this day. So her father and I had a very abusive relationship. It somehow affected her, and her dad was not abusive towards her, but he did a very violent act. He threw her cell phone on the roof at the police district. It was really bizarre, but he was angry at me. My daughter then said, I cannot be in Poppy's presence no more. He made her afraid because not that she was necessarily afraid of him, but violence wasn't for her. So our actions do come up on our children, and it does affect them. And I commend my youngest daughter tremendously because if a situation to this day, and she's only 19, and I'm very proud of her, if a situation becomes violent and she doesn't like something, she will remove herself from it. She will physically say, I cannot, this is not the way I want to live, this is not what I want for myself, because she's chosen not to live. But the thing is, it affects our children tremendously. We think we're hiding it, like they don't see it, but they, as much as we love them, they love us, and they can feel it. And I'm gonna keep it real, like we have to break the cycle. Like I love my children tremendously. I'm sure everybody does with the girls. Everybody always know how much I love my babies. Not saying folks don't, but I never mistreat my children. I refuse to allow that cycle to continue with my children. In relationships though, I'm gonna own it. I'm an abuser as well. You start talking shit to me, you start getting down on me, I'm gonna get right back at you. But then I get mad at myself because now I'm who I don't want to be.
It's like you adapt those same characteristics, and it goes from being drilled into you. And like you was saying earlier, like now you have to, whether it's defending yourself or now you're just taking on the same persona, just like can't beat them, join them, so to speak. And I wanted to go there as far as, and Janessa, I still want you to answer, but in regards to how it affects the children. With your daughter, she just took the opposite route. I was just like, I've seen this so much. It's like now that trauma means I don't want anything that seems remotely violent around me. So, but on the flip side, then some children become abusers because they think it's normal. So Janessa, you can definitely go ahead and answer that.
So, my particular situation, I suffer narcissistic abuse, and that comes from the abuser being a narcissist and having a mental disorder that's called narcissistic personality disorder. And it's on the spectrum of being a sociopath. Okay? It's a personality disorder.
Yeah.
So this is something that it's not personal, and I had to learn it wasn't personal. They have an illness. So even though I divorced him, he's still the parent of my children, and we co-parent. So he sees my children as much as I see my children, and so he still has those traits, even though technically he's a good father. You know, on paper he's a provider, and I know it's not malicious. He's a verbal abuser, he's an emotional abuser, and I see that in my kids, and I see that more so with my son, because of course, you know, my children are mixed, so you know, my children are Puerto Rican and black, and in both cultures, it's a very macho with the kids, with the son. So there's a lot of verbal and emotional abuse in our culture anyway, between fathers and sons, okay, to act a certain way. And then when you have someone that's a narcissist on top of that, it just like antes it up. So with my situation, my J-Day when I left, well, my children were 5 and 6. And I never fought in front of my children. But that day, they witnessed him dragging me and choking me. So that was very traumatic for them. And I was nervous because in my mind, that's the only reason why I left, because I couldn't hide it. And our nephews had called the cops, and multiple cops came in because my significant other worked in law enforcement. All the cops and like the sergeant had to be called because it was one of them. You know, he was one of them that got in trouble. So my kids witnessed all of that, and it was extremely traumatic, and I couldn't sweep that under the rug. That's the only reason why I moved forward. And I didn't think that they were going to understand because they were 5 and 6. My kids are 13 months apart. But immediately, he was removed from the home, and I had a restraining order. And it was 5 days before Christmas, and he was not in our home for 30 days. My son, that's 6 years old, my kids were never allowed to sleep with us. The dad didn't allow them to sleep with us. My son and daughter slept with me every night because they said they didn't want me to be alone. My son would write me a letter in first grade every day and put it either on my pillow or on my seat for work. Mommy, don't be upset, don't be sad, you're a good woman, have a happy day today, at 6 years old, consoling me. My daughter didn't do any of these things initially. My son's the one that did it initially. And my kids are very, very academic and always were straight A students, really well behaved. And then my son is, he's a Cancer, so he's super emotional and very sensitive. And the teacher started noticing him being more of a hermit. And one day he just started crying in class. And it was months after. At this point, I had left the dad. The dad restraining order was dropped. He moved back into the home. I had my own apartment. It was months later, and my son just cried out of nowhere and then told the teacher that because his dad is a bully, his dad got locked up. And he's scared. He's scared because when he does not see me, because I'm at work, he's not sure if his dad is hurting me. And I was like, oh my God, I didn't know this. And I remember one day I was driving. At this point, it was still within a year of the separation. And I didn't know if I made the right decision. My family didn't even know that I was separated.
Oh, wow, okay.
I didn't know if I had made the right decision. And I was like driving my kids to the school because I allowed my ex-husband to stay in the house. I didn't take anything. My kids, I still go to the same school. I just moved somewhere 15 minutes away so that they didn't have to disrupt their regular every day. So I was questioning what I was doing. Like I was questioning the fact that I left because I saw that it was being a lot on my kids. Like every 2 days they're with me, 2 days they're with dad. I'm driving them to school. They're not on the bus anymore. It was like a lot.
Yeah.
They had to learn this new schedule. So I'm driving. And my son, still 6 years old, is in the back seat, and I'm like, "Hey, Pop," I call him Pop, and I'm like, "Hey, Pop, what do you feel? How do you feel about this 2-house thing? You know, are you okay with it, or do you prefer Mommy to go back with Daddy?" I did not want to go back with Daddy, but I was willing to take the brunt for my children to be happy. And my son says, 7:30 in the morning, "You know what, Mommy? I kind of like it because at least I don't hear you cry at night anymore." And I was like, "What?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Every time you and Daddy would argue and you have the door closed, me and my sister," he said her name, we hear it. So he would tell me that either she would leave her room and go to his room, or he would leave his room and go to her room. And he's like, or sometimes he said he would get like waken out of his sleep and he would hear it. And he started telling me verbatim all of the arguments we had. And before I got choked, my significant other was very physical, like punching holes in the walls or the closet to shut me up, or like hitting the TV or whatever. So he would break things and leave holes. So my son started saying to me, he's like, because I never knew if daddy hit you or not. I just woke up in the morning and now there's a hole in the wall. So I didn't know if it's because you were thrown into the wall. And he's like, and now I don't have to worry about that. So my sleeps are good.
Wow.
And I'm like, damn. You know what I'm saying? That's how they were affected then initially.
And let me just stop you right there. And I want to say this to everybody that's watching. The fact that we think most people, and I'm not going to assume, but I know a lot of people that are in these situations stay for the kids.
Worst thing ever.
These kids are not dumb. These kids are very aware. So for your child at 6 years old to tell you, I've heard this, I've heard that, I've experienced this, I know this, and I feel better based on it. We think we're doing something on behalf of the children, or this is going to be better, and those kids just rather you be safe because they love you as a parent, you know?
Yeah. And as they're older now, and they can understand more things now, and they're able to process things more, we talk about new things and other things, and so now my daughter is more vocal, and she starts telling me things that she remembers, and they'll have conversations with me, and they'll say things like, you know, if their dad talks about me, I don't like that daddy's a bully, I don't know that he's talking. So I know the emotional and verbal abuse is still there, and it's hard because I want them to respect their dad, and I don't want it to be about me. I want them to respect their dad as their dad, and I tell them, as long as your dad is a good dad to you, do not worry about how your dad is to me. He's not my husband anymore, and I can handle myself.
Right.
But it's hard for them to unblur those lines.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? And my daughter, I gifted my kids a book about domestic violence. And she had never talked to me about the domestic violence. I thought she was just too young to know. And as she was reading it out loud with my son, she would stop like in the middle of the page and she would be like, remember when? And I was like, she's reading a book and she would stop and they would replay something that happened in their real life with something that was in the book. And that's the first time I realized that she knew what was going on. But she thought it was normal, and she's a daddy's girl.
Yeah.
And she just thinks that her dad's a bully. She just thinks that's how he is. She doesn't understand that, well, at that time, because I try my best to let her know that that's not normal. But he's like that with everybody because he has a disorder, right? He's like that with all his girlfriends. They've witnessed it, not to that same extent, but verbally and emotionally. And he's just like that, you know? So they definitely are affected.
Yeah.
We have another question.
Yes, they would like to know, was the book Mommy Wake Up?
Yes.
And
Yes,
Kids
best book
and-
ever.
she's saying hi and she's asking
Hey,
Hi.
Akia. So our other guest, Akia from Akia's Heart, she was unable to be here, but she did write Mommy Wake Up, and it is a very, very, very great resource to
Best book
anyone
ever.
experiencing domestic violence, especially if there are children involved. So please definitely get that. Follow her. Go to her website. I was definitely going to give that as a resource because that's why I wanted her here today, because that book was very, very important. So hey, Akia.
and she wants to know, did the children get counseling?
So the children have gotten counseling. It's hard for me to have them in long-term counseling because it's my field and I know all the counselors. And I've gotten them counseling, but I'm very protective of my kids, and the counselors that I know me, you know, and a lot of them have crossed the lines with the children. A lot of non-disclosure, okay?
Wow.
And I've gotten them counseling in school. I've gotten them counseling outside. I've done counseling things with them.
Okay.
And what I've learned is that they're so young. When they're ready to talk, they'll talk. I just started doing therapeutic things with them,
Okay.
not necessarily counseling, okay? Because even though I'm a counselor by trade and I believe in counseling, counselors are humans and there's a lot of human error. And not everyone has a good spirit, and not everyone has a good heart. And a lot of these counselors also knew their father.
So with that was just
It was very conflicting.
dynamic.
I'm not about to take my kids to Newark to get counseling. You see what I'm saying? I should be able to do it in my neighborhood. And also, I wanted my kids to feel comfortable with the counselors. So like I wanted my son to have a minority male. And realistically, there's just limitations, in the counseling. So I had to be proactive and look at, because I'm a counselor, other therapeutic measures, which I tell people all the time. You need therapy, not physically sitting with someone. You need therapy, therapeutic things, and there's so many different things, and you need to do more than one thing. Because let's say working out is your form of therapy, and you do that every day, but let's say you get a new job and you're not able to work out no more, now you don't feel good because your one thing you don't do.
Yeah.
So you can't put all your eggs in one basket. So because I know that, I do things that are therapeutic for my kid. What my son thinks is therapeutic is different than my daughter. So I had to provide them therapeutic outlets individually.
Okay.
And that's what I've done.
And Teresa, had your kids going through any like counseling or therapy services?
No, actually, the one time I took my oldest daughter for some services, they always turn it around to, well, is he touching you? Is he doing this? It's terrible how they turn it around to like molestation so my daughter walked out of the room because that was her stepfather, who was very good to her, and she walked out of the room. She was like, "This is ridiculous."
Yeah.
Like she felt terrible.
So it wasn't even like
It's
useful like that. It could have been.
exactly. So and then the same thing, for my youngest daughter, I had taken her because she had a learning disability, and I thought that was attributed to the abuse. So I took her to LaSalle, and right away, they start talking about child abuse, and it's bizarre. Like, ask the child why they're sad.
Right.
Don't start implementing things in their head. And I saw the tape, so they actually wound up calling DHS on me because my child had indicated that, because I don't teach my children to lie. My kids don't lie. They don't have to lie. I don't lie. It may not be your truth, but it's my truth.
Right.
So, when the girl asked her, like, does your mom ever smack you? And my daughter, she was like 6, and she said, yeah, my mom smacks me and my hand turns red. I have a light-skinned child, so she's going to turn red when you smack her.
So that went from one extreme to the next.
I had called on me. I'm a wonderful mother. I was devastated. I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. And all I wanted was for my child, does her learning disability have anything to do with what she went through? And can we help her? How can we help her? And even the counselor said, I'm sorry, you admitted to smacking her. And then the person with DHS was like, well, it's not against the law to admit that. And I was like, she scratches herself when she gets angry. So I'm like, stop. And I was like, because you can't admit stuff like that. And it was an open and shut case, but it was the worst week of my life because I thought they were going to take my child away from me, and I just wanted to help her.
Right.
And the same thing happened with my oldest daughter. So and I understand there's a lot of abuse, a lot of things in play, but have a conversation with the child. They're so smart. They're so amazing. They'll tell you.
So what I'm getting, I'm glad that question was asked, because we're basically wanting to know, are the kids, after witnessing or being a part of the traumatic experiences, are they then getting services? And now, in both situations, it's being counterproductive. I know that, Janessa, your situation is unique based on, where you live and everything like that, but just that alone, that is an aspect. Even like you said, those lines have been blurred, that professionalism, all of those factors.
They don't have the training, they're not specialists. I know they're not specialists, so it's just really difficult, to move forward with that. And a lot of organizations that do counseling, they beat over their counselors had cultural sensitivity. They still need the training because they're never cultural appropriate. But something that they don't teach is victim sensitivity. Okay, so they need to talk to children and the parents in a certain term, the same way we do certain things for veterans. There's certain words you don't use, certain noises you don't do. It's the same thing with victims. So that's one of the other things I try to teach too. Is if we're constantly saying cultural sensitivity is needed, which it is, trust me, it is. Even when they give it, it's that's not it. Victim sensitivity is extremely needed because it's how you ask the questions, when you ask the question, the tone that you ask, for the children, for the victim, even for the abuser.
Yeah. Okay. Now, real quick, because I know you have a question.
One last thing, Akia said that receiving therapy for the child is very, especially for traumatic experiences and abuse, is very important. And she said that she can refer. So definitely reach out to her after the show because she can refer. And it needs to be a therapist. That's one of the things that's very important.
Yeah, okay. So, again, I want to thank you guys for coming. Thank you guys for giving and sharing this information, sharing these experiences. I just want to say to all of my viewers, anyone that is experiencing domestic violence, if you're closely related, if it's affecting you in any way, shape, or form, please reach out to the resources. If you need help, reach out to me. I will get you to the resources because this is a very, very, very widespread, wide range, not cookie cutter situation, and I just want to make sure that everyone is getting the help, the services, and the support that they need. I want to thank my lovely guests. I want to thank my lovely audience, and I want to thank all you guys for tuning in, and I will check y'all next week. Good night.
Talk to me Tuesday, it's fresh and it's Tuesday. Every week a new topic, and we can get it chopping. Talk to me Tuesday, it's fresh and it's Tuesday. Every week a new topic, and we can get it chopping.